Welcome back to Up Front. Remember the bobblehead judge ad from the 2008 Supreme Court race? That was an issue ad, and there was a lot of legal wrangling last week over a rule that would have required the groups behind these kinds of ads to disclose who is paying for them. In a rare point of agreement, the liberal organization, One Wisconsin Now, and conservative organization, Club for Growth, sued to overturn the rule by the Government Accountability Board. The two groups want a stipulation that will let them continue their activities without financial disclosure. But the GAB says it's going to be watching very carefully. So what does all of this mean to voters? Today we're asking Scott Ross of One Wisconsin Now and Jay Heck of Common Cause Wisconsin, a supporter of the disclosure rule. Thanks to both of you for being with us today.
Thanks, Mike.
Scott Ross, your group doesn't do the video ads that we just talked about, but you are involved in political activities and you do talk about the issues. So based on what has happened in the last week, has anything really changed? Will your group and other groups be able to do what they've done in past elections?
No, because of the success we've had with this lawsuit and the agreement with the Government Accountability Board, the Government Accountability Board recognized that it doesn't have the right to regulate issue advocacy under the state's campaign finance laws. And organizations and individuals will be able to talk about the important issues, public policies, public officials, as much as they want in terms of things that face the state of Wisconsin. And this is a big victory for the First Amendment. It's a big victory for people all across the state of Wisconsin.
Do you think anything has changed, Jay Heck?
Well, I think it clarifies to some degree what's an issue ad and what a campaign ad disguised as issue advocacy might be. But keep in mind here, disclosure is something we have not had in Wisconsin in these types of campaign ads masquerading as issue ads since 1976. The United States Supreme Court earlier this year opened up the floodgates of corporate and union spending in the Citizens United decision, but that same court also said by an 8-to-1 vote that you can require more robust disclosure of exactly the types of communications you were referring to, the bobblehead ads. And so I think where we're left is we're left with a very strong rule in place, but that we'll have to decide on a case-by-case basis what actually constitutes an issue ad and what constitutes a campaign
Isn't
ad.
that awfully difficult? That's a terribly difficult thing to decide what is an issue ad, what is a campaign ad. Would you not agree?
Well, no, because I think issue ads...
You don't think so?
I don't think so, because I think issue ads are about issues. And when you interject the name of a candidate, then you have to look at the context in which that candidate is mentioned. And if it's clearly a communication susceptible to no other interpretation than to vote for or against, without using words like vote for or against, then it should be required registration and disclosure.
I'm going to have you respond to that.
Well, I mean, you know, individuals and organizations need to have the ability to talk about public policy and talk about public issues no matter what time of year it is. I mean, public officials shouldn't have a monopoly on our public policy debate no matter when it is. And the reason that we got involved in this lawsuit and filed it was because the rule was so broad and expansive, it could apply to communications we do all year round with press releases. Our website would be under assault. The email communications we do with our more than 50,000 supporters across the state. And I think the shaky footing that GAB was on is indicative of how quickly they tried to settle this lawsuit and sign the stipulation, because it was a real threat to the First Amendment.
Well, first of all, this rule only applies to the 60 days prior to a general election and the 30 days prior to a primary election. It doesn't affect any of the rest of the year. It doesn't affect the off year, the non-election year. You know, Scott's group and any other group can say whatever they want, and they won't be required to disclose or regulate. But, you know, the citizens' right to know who's trying to influence an election far outweighs the desire by some of these groups to maintain their secrecy and anonymity.
Let me have you respond to that. Why is increased transparency a bad thing for our democracy?
Well, because...
And that's really what we're talking about, isn't it?
But if you're talking about people... One Wisconsin Now, an organization like ours on all ends of the ideological spectrum, are not out there telling you who to vote for. So we shouldn't be regulated as though we are.
To influence outcomes of elections?
Absolutely not.
Then you have nothing to worry about.
Absolutely not. Exactly. But the problem is that the GAB rule was so broad that it would impact literally every 501c3 and 501c4 organization that ever mentions somebody who happens to be a public official within 60 days of an election. And, you know, when we do things, we talk about taxation, fair taxation, the right of people, of working people to have a say in their employment all year round. And when we do, we have a broad range of websites, whether it's, WMC Watch, about holding Wisconsin manufacturers and commerce accountable, Protect Wisconsin's Vote, or ScotWalkerFailureFiles.com. We have a right to talk about the important public policy issues before the people of the state of Wisconsin, and thankfully, because of the stipulation, we are going to be able to continue to do so.
You absolutely have a right to do so. But if what you're talking about is a communication that by any reasonable interpretation is designed to influence someone's vote, then you should tell us who you are. The voters of this state have the right to know who's trying to influence the outcome of an election.
But isn't the First Amendment pretty clear on this? It just says Congress shall make no law. I mean, is it pretty clear? Well,
it is, but the United States Supreme Court has ruled time and again that voters have the right to know who's behind these communications, and that even in January in the Citizens United case, they voted 8-1 to require more robust disclosure. So citizens' ability to know who's trying to influence their vote again far outweighs the ability of groups to maintain secrecy. If his group runs an ad that's trying to influence the outcome of election, he'll have to register and disclose. If he doesn't, and if the type of communication he's making is simply informational, then he's got nothing to worry about.
You think you have anything to worry about?
Absolutely not, because of the fact that the GAB rule was far too broad, and so far we have stopped it, and that's good news for the First Amendment and people across the state of Wisconsin.
Well, you haven't stopped the rule. You've won a clarification of the rule.
Well, it's pretty clear that the Government Accountability Board said it is not going to enforce these overbroad anti-First Amendment parts of this, and so we are very pleased with where we're at right now.
On a case-by-case basis.
I don't think this story's over. I don't know. I just get that sense, but we'll be watching closely. Scott Ross from One Wisconsin Now, Jay Heck from Common Cause Wisconsin. Thanks to both of you for being with us today. We appreciate it. Next, big political stars and big political bucks.